Hi, I am Pastor Ewell here at Brookside Church. I am the Director of Ministry here, and today I'm coming to talk to you about an exciting day that we got coming up, and it's called our Day of Giving. And why a Day of Giving? Well, it's simple. It's because John 3:16 says that for God so loved the world that he did what? He gave. And so we've been rolling out our vision statement to our church and to our online community and to our community at large. And it's simply this: Brookside exists to build Jesus-centered homes through healthy relationships that result in gospel-saturated communities. We do that simply by what we're calling the portrait of a Jesus follower. And you say, well, what does that portrait look like? The portrait of a Jesus follower is simple. It has four pieces to it, and that's to give of your time, your talent, your treasure, and then your testimony. And why do we go with that as a portrait? Well, listen to this. Jesus, when he came to the earth, gave of his time. He spent time with people in the marketplace. He spent time healing people. He spent time in people's living rooms and spending time with them. He even took time to grieve with people at funerals and yet celebrate with them at weddings. And so as we think about how we spend our time, we're following this portrait that Jesus set for us, and we are committing ourselves to spending time with others because that's what Jesus did and that's what we do. What about our talent? Well, when Jesus came, what he did was he redeemed the gifts that he equipped us with. You say, well, how did he do that, Pastor? Well, if you look back, when he called his disciples, the first four that he called were what? Fishermen. And he says to them, no longer do you need to worry about just fishing, but I want to make you fishers of men, right? And so one day they're out and they're using their talent to try and catch fish, and they can't catch any fish at all. And he says, hey, launch over to the other side and put your net down. And he takes their talent, the gift that he's redeeming in them, and they cast their nets over and they go to pull them up, and yet they can't get them on the boat because why? There's so many fish in that boat, in that net, that the net breaks. Jesus takes our talents and he redeems them within us, and he calls us to use what he's given us. Just like he took the 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, and he says to them, all of these people, the disciple says, all these people are hungry, and he says, what do you have? And he looks over and he sees a kid with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, and he feeds over 5,000 people. And so Jesus redeems our gifts within us. And then what about our treasure? Well, if I'm spending time with Jesus and he's spending time with me and he's gifted me with gifts, and I'm using those gifts to build his kingdom, the natural outflow of doing that is to give of my resources. And you might say, well, I don't have much resources to give. Well, there was a woman in the Bible who had very little, but she gave a lot. She gave of all of her talents, all of her resources, even though she had very little. So to use your talents, your resources, doesn't mean you got to have a lot. It just means you have to use what God has given you. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. It all belongs to God. And you know what he loves? He loves a cheerful giver. And here's what he tells us as it relates to giving and using our resources, the things that he's given us to freely enjoy. He says, upon the first day of the week, decide what you're going to give and then give that. And so he calls us to use then our talents or our resources. And all of that results in being able to share our testimony, to tell our story. Why do you tell your story? A couple of things that hit me is so that people know, first of all, Jesus is real, that God is at work within me both to will and to do his good pleasure. Jesus is real. The second reason why we tell our story is that we might challenge others to step it up in the kingdom and use their time, talents, and treasure to build God's kingdom. He tells us to go therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he says, and you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost part of the world. The way we do that is by telling our stories of how God has impacted us. And that's how we build his kingdom. And so based on these 4 things, we decided, hey, on this portrait, we're going to give a call to action. We want you to figure out how you're going to give generously of your time. Who are you going to spend time on the couch with? Whose house are you going to visit and spend time? Who are you going to go on that walk with? Who are you going to do life with? That's spending of your time. And then how about your talent? What has God gifted you with? Hey, just because you don't know what your talent is, doesn't mean you don't have one. Spend time in prayer figuring out what God has gifted you to do. What are you passionate about? What is it that you have to give that you may not even think is special, but God does? And he redeems that gift in you, and he causes you to use that gift. And then how about your resources? You may not have a lot, but you got something. And so whatever God calls you to give upon the first day of the week, decide what you're going to give. And we are talking about your treasure, your money, and then you give that. The woman with the talent didn't have a lot. She had a little, but she gave a lot. And so whatever you give, it's going to be a lot, because just like he took the 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, he can take your treasure and he can multiply that. The command is give, and it shall be given unto you. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over shall mean give unto your bosom. Use your resource for the kingdom, and God will certainly use that resource to bless others. And then finally, we want you to tell your story. How is God working with you through those 3 avenues? We want to hear about that so we can use your story to encourage or challenge somebody else. Somebody needs to hear how God is at work within you, and then they'll know that he can do that same work within them. So what is our Day of Giving about? Our Day of Giving is all about building gospel-saturated communities, about building healthy relationships, and about building Jesus-centered homes. Christ-centered homes is what it's all about. And we sum it up by just simply saying it's Jesus-centered everything. And so I want you to get excited with me. I want you to, on the Day of Giving, come ready to give one of those 4 things, or all 4 if that's what God is leading you to do. You pray about it and you let God move you in a way that he wants to. Thank you so much. We look forward to this Day of Giving, and we want you to get excited with us.